Now, this is my idea of an ass bandit. Wait till some of the local girls get a look at you, scrotum head. Good evening, everyone. This is Stone Gasman live from New York City, and tonight we are going to be doing an audio commentary for the 1982 classic film An Officer and a Gentleman, directed by Taylor Hackford and starring Richard Gere and Debra Winger. And as the rest of the universe celebrates the release of Top Gun Maverick, which will probably end up being the #1 movie of the year, for better or for worse, I've decided to instead stay here at home and watch An Officer and a Gentleman and do an audio commentary for it. Partly because it's the 40th anniversary of this movie, and during the course of this commentary, I will showcase a lot of similarities it has with Top Gun. Although we're going to go way beyond that as well, because today is also the birthday of Louis Gossett Jr., who plays Sergeant Foley in this movie. And so, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons we need to go back to An Officer and a Gentleman and celebrate it for what it is, which it became this sleeper hit in 1982, got $190 million on a $6 to $7 million budget. That's pretty massive, and when you consider the ratios and everything, I mean, it actually kind of did even better than Top Gun. I mean, considering if you compare the budgets and everything. But anyway, we're going to get into all that. I mean, at any rate, I am paused at the Paramount logo for An Officer and a Gentleman. So I will give everybody about 60 seconds here, and then I will go ahead and press play. And this movie means a lot to me. Not necessarily because of the fact that I actually served in the United States Navy for 8 years, but because of the fact that I've seen this film. I first saw this film too young, way too young. I was 10 years old, and it was one of those instances where, of course, my 10-year-old perverted self wanted to check out the R-rated movies that my parents had in our VHS collection. And so this was one of the first ones that I watched, along with 10, starring Dudley Moore and Bo Derek, which I'm sure a lot of people remember famously for Bo Derek running on the beach. So these were like my entrances into adult entertainment, adult stories. But I mean, and they both stuck with me over the years, particularly An Officer and a Gentleman, because, like I said, I had a copy of it in the military when the studio did not provide like little cassette tapes for it to be played on Navy ships because the Pentagon didn't support the making of this movie. And we're going to get into that as well as we go along. But before I press play, just a shout out to those in the chat. A very good evening, Katrina. Lovely to see you here. And Rob Gasper, thank you so much for both of you for coming out tonight to celebrate this 40th anniversary commentary for An Officer and a Gentleman. So without further ado, I think we should go ahead and press play now. So here again, I'm paused at the Paramount logo for Officer and Gentleman, and we will count down on 3, 2, 1, and play. And the funny thing about Paramount was that nobody at the studio, including the president of the company, supported the making of this movie. As a matter of fact, it took 8 long years for this script to see the light of cinematic day. That's a really long time. It was passed around between different studios and everything. Martin Elfin served as the primary producer. Taylor Hackford had only directed one other movie before this, and to this day, I've never seen it. And it's called The Idolmaker, which is a musical that came out in 1980. And it wasn't a hit, but it at least proved to studio heads that Taylor Hackford could helm a movie. And this was an interesting production in that there was a lot of creative careers. There were a lot of careers on the line as far as whether this film was going to work or not. It was really going to make or break a lot of people's careers. I mean, this was and it's a landmark film because of the reason why it surpassed everybody's expectations to become this word of mouth mega hit. I mean, it was the third biggest box office hit of 1982, right after E.T. and Tootsie. And remember, this is an R-rated movie, so that's pretty spectacular. I mean, you can't in terms of R-rated cinema at this time, you can't ask for anything better. I mean, it's amazing what this film was able to accomplish once it made it to the theaters. But in the truth of the matter is that even after the studios saw the finished product, they hated it. They hated it. They thought the movie sucked. They thought, "Oh no, this is gonna be a complete disaster." I mean, this is not a joke, and it really wasn't until a test screening with not necessarily the actual music you hear in the movie, but with little temp tracks laid that convinced the studio. It actually convinced the studio, okay, well, maybe we should at least pay for a soundtrack for this movie. And of course, the soundtrack is one of the things that's absolutely famous. But here we open up on Richard Gere. I believe he was 31 when this movie was shot. And we're going to talk a lot about Richard Gere and Debra Winger much, much later. But I think what's absolutely important in these opening scenes is the fact that we showcase what Richard Gere's life as a child was like in the Philippines, with a first-class petty officer in the Navy as a father. And Douglas Day Stewart, who wrote the screenplay for An Officer and a Gentleman, he actually served as a Navy officer in the 1960s. He was not flying jets or even training for that, but he was in Pensacola. He had graduated from Rhode Island, the school in Rhode Island, and he had garnered all this experience. And a lot of all this that he wrote is based upon his actual experiences in the military. It's one of those instances where I think a lot of studios got cold feet because, oh my God, this is too real. Yeah, this script is written almost mirroring exactly his experiences as a Navy officer in the 1960s. You can't ask for that verisimilitude, anymore if you could try it. I mean, and just for quick comparison, even though we're going to go back to Top Gun many times throughout this commentary, the three guys that the producer hired to write Top Gun, none of them had any military experience whatsoever. But of course, the major difference is that the Pentagon, who always feels the need to review and approve every script that involves the military, they did not like the script for An Officer and a Gentleman. I mean, in fact, they thought it was blasphemous. The idea that, oh no, our Navy officers, they don't drink and swear, and they don't screw a bunch of prostitutes. And a lot of these women are actually real prostitutes in the Philippines because they actually shot down there, in and around the very famous Navy base Subic Bay. This was all shot in the Philippines, and I tell you, I mean, the director had to jump through hoops to get approval from Paramount to actually go down to the Philippines to shoot all this. But here again, it adds to the authenticity as we tell the story of Zach Mayo and all the experiences that he had overseas, and what exactly he's doing in Seattle, Washington, as he celebrates his, apparently, I think, his 18th birthday present with his father, who, of course, is a Navy lifer who, he drinks a lot. He failed as a father for reasons we will find out later. But yeah, all that footage was shot in the Philippines, and director Taylor Hackford, I think, brilliantly fused the footage that was shot between the shots in the hotel room and what Richard Gere is thinking, and these flashbacks back to the Philippines. And then once his father comes out and starts puking, hungover and everything, we get the picture. I mean, within just 5 minutes, we get a perfect picture of these two characters. especially Zach, who is, of course, the protagonist of the story. But Robert Loggia, who plays Byron Mayo here, he was actually he did a lot of movies after An Officer and a Gentleman, and this kind of recharged his career after a television series had ended, and you would think that his career was over at this point, but no, this kind of recharged his career. However, he was supposed to have a much bigger role in the script. I mean, he was actually even supposed to visit Zach several times when he's in training, and continue talking to him about like what are you doing down here? I mean, you really think you have what it takes to become a Navy officer? But of course, the real reason why, of course, Byron is kind of trying to, in his own drunken way, trying to tell his son that he doesn't want to become an officer is because he doesn't want to salute him later. I mean, that's a very, very scary prospect for someone like Byron, who can't handle his own son becoming a Navy officer. And of course, yeah, the whole story, the whole backbone of the story that Douglas State Stewart wrote, it's essentially about a son who tries to prove to his father that he's the better man. I mean, yeah, he just laughs and mocks at him. He hits the mirror. I mean, Robert Loggia is great in this scene, even though his character is kind of despicable. Yeah, there's several scenes where they were wearing boxer shorts, and it always tends to be the boxer shorts tend to be open many times. But at any rate, but this is, I mean, we don't see Robert Loggia again after this scene, and I think that worked for the film actually just perfectly fine, because here again we get everything that we know about his character with this scene and everything. And Richard Gere says it right there. I mean, you're afraid that you're gonna have to salute me someday, and it's like, no, no, of course not. Now I love the picture in between them, join the Navy picture from the 40s there. And this film, Richard Gere and director Taylor Hackford never intended this to be a commercial for the United States Navy, but they still wanted to honor um, military personnel as being blue collar workers. That's the difference between these characters and the characters in Top Gun. These are working class individuals who are going through struggles in their lives. While Top Gun tends to be about who has the giant, the biggest cock in the air. I mean, in so many words. I mean, it's the McDonald's version of the story. And look, they both lead characters ride motorcycles. I mean, you can't get any more similar than that. But the ships that you saw in the background there, they were the New Jersey and the Missouri, both actual battleships, and also the aircraft carrier, the Hornet. Those are all the ships that you see in the background when the title comes up here. And Louis Gossett Jr. as Foley. Yes. Yes. Happy birthday, Louis Gossett Jr. He turns 87 years old today. And we're going to talk a lot about Louis Gossett here, because he did a lot of movies in the 1970s, a lot of them inconsequential, but he built his reputation as an actor throughout that time. And I must say that, written by Douglas State Stewart, he also served as associate producer. But as you will see, and there's director Taylor Hackford's credit, here's through these doors past the future of naval aviation. And here comes the towering Louis Gossett Jr. in the role of Marine Sergeant Foley. As you can see, he has a number of awards from his service in Vietnam, and you can almost hear a helicopter in the background, very, very subtly. I think that was added by the sound team to let us know, okay, this guy has killed people. He has seen some some shit that you or I couldn't even imagine. And he's been through a lot. I mean, he has Purple Hearts, he has all that stuff, and he's still a devoted Marine. And here he is training this new class of, oh god, listening to Mick Jagger music and bad mouthing your country, I bet. Now, if some of this dialogue is going to sound very, very familiar, because one of the advisors on this movie that served as a personal coach to Louis Gossett Jr. was, in fact, R. Lee Ermey, who would later star in Full Metal Jacket. So it's no coincidence that the Steers for Queers line shows up in both of those films in the openings, when we have the drill instructor giving all the recruits an opening speech of what they're going to expect, and that it's their job to eliminate the weeds, to find their weaknesses. Because here again, a lot of civilians don't know that, here again, that this drill instructor, played by Louis Gossett Jr., he has to train the individuals that he's going to salute. That's a pretty tall, very hard order. So he doesn't have time for bullshit. He just now, okay, you think I'm a you boy, this whole youth bit right here. It was actually used before in an episode of Gomer Pyle, United States Marine Corps, sans the sexual connotations and the harsh language. It's basically the same thing, but it was only heard one other time before, and that was on an episode of Gomer Pyle. I must have seen this movie 50 times. I still crack up to, yeah. It's just, Richard Gere, of course, right away, as you know, Katrina, starts out right here as like such a smart ass. And instantly, Louis Gossett Jr. calls him out for being a pretender. Look, I'm speaking from personal experience. This is exactly how drill instructors speak. And look, granted, I wasn't in the program like this. I just did the typical Navy boot camp training in Illinois, and I know it's a far stretch. But at the same time, look, the idea is completely the same. They say a bunch of bullshit to intimidate you, to break you. It's not personal. People have asked me all the time. People that are about to join the military, not specifically the Navy and otherwise, and they always ask me, what should I expect? Should I be scared? Should I be intimidated? It's like, look, just let it go in one year and go out the other year. But at the same time, just do exactly what they say, Now, this actor right here, Tony Plana, the director had seen him in a movie that came out a year before this called Zoot Suit. And this character of Della Sera, this little Chicano that went to Texas Tech with honors, thinks he's going to be an officer in the United States Navy. Well, there was no dialogue for this character in Douglas Day Stewart's script. And a lot of these characters who later became, these actors who later became famous, was because of this film and what built into the script in terms of character development, like with Della Sera's character. As we're going to see, he's going to be the first one to volunteer to have his head shaved. He's gung-ho about whatever the assignment is, or whatever the obstacle that they have to get through for each day and everything. And he eventually becomes a leader. Most of it's told visually, too. It's not spelled out for the audience. You can see the progression of Della Sera as the movie goes along. Now, and here we have Lisa Blount, who plays Lynette, as well as Debra Winger, of course, as Paula. These working class women in this this very small town where, in actuality, where this was filmed in Washington, there was an economic decline, and there was a lot of jobs that were lost fairly recently. And a lot of the people that worked on this film were, of course, locals and extras that came in from the town. This tiny little town in Washington State. This film production company came there for about 4 to 5 months. Well, actually, strike that. Actually, An Officer and a Gentleman was shot over a 10-week period. And they noted in the 25th anniversary documentary that it was one of the first major productions where the shooting schedule was cut from 12 weeks to 10 weeks. I mean, they were really keeping Taylor Hackford's hands tied in terms of how this production went along, because here again, Paramount had no faith. They had no faith in this production, and they were merely just banking on the film's two stars. Richard Gere and Debra Winger had both come off of very popular movies a couple years before this. I mean, he was in American Gigolo, and she was in Urban Cowboy with John Travolta. And it's funny because anybody that remembers owning the VHS tape for An Officer and a Gentleman probably remembers that they changed a lot of the music. Now, the cut that we're watching on the Blu-ray is, in fact, the theatrical cut that played in 1982. But it was only on the VHS version where they didn't want to pay rights to some of the musicians, and so they substituted alternate tracks for the music sequences like the one we just saw. And I'm sure that greatly aggravated those who bought the VHS tape thinking they were going to get the movie that they saw and heard in theaters, and instead they got this alternate version where a lot of the music was changed. I mean, as an audience member, I can't imagine being more disappointed than that. But here we slowly but surely get to meet Zach's roommates. There's David Keith and Harold Sylvester, and then coming in is also David Caruso. And David Caruso is going to have some big moments here later in the movie as this other cadet, and he would later have a career after this. So we'll talk about him when we get to those scenes. But see, there's Harold Sylvester on the right. I mean, he said in the documentary that many people have come to him over the years and have told him that they joined the military because of this movie. And here again, it's funny because the Pentagon did not support the making of it. They were so embarrassed. And see, that's the thing. The thing that comes with the military and depicting the military on screen, the last thing they want is embarrassment. That is the absolute last thing. They don't want they don't want them being looked at as like fools, or like that they don't know what they're doing, or that they may be corrupt. One of the most famous Navy movies of all time is, of course, The Caine Mutiny, starring Humphrey Bogart. And another film that is kind of similar to that, although it's on a submarine instead of a ship, is Crimson Tide, which was directed by, of course, Top Gun director Tony Scott. And both of those movies were not supported by the military for the simple reason that it showcased a mutiny. And of course, if you ask anybody in the military or the Pentagon, oh no, we've never had a mutiny in the history of time. Yeah, whatever. Despite the fact I had a secret clearance in the military, I'm not going to go so far as to explain any actual events, but look, come on. I mean, it's pretty obvious that that there has been a mutiny at one point or another. Otherwise, they wouldn't have bothered of actually saying that. See you in a month when you get liberty. And David Keith is It's like the bodacious set of tatas. Yes, yes, we noticed. Yes. And a lot of this dialogue was here again taken from actual. Douglas Day Stewart's DI was actually a white Southern man who, here again, the exact polar opposite of Louis Gossett Jr. But at any rate, yeah, I mean, he was a white Southern guy who trained to become a Navy officer, and he served later in Florida and other places. Um, but all of this dialogue is taken directly uh, from the drill instructor that he had. And of course, a lot of the references to Vietnam are very real. And of course, this was another thing that kind of, kind of, another reason why the script was so controversial in Hollywood was because there was this real bad taste about the military after Vietnam. But all these references right here, the references to Gooks and the napalm and everything. That's all from Vietnam. Uh, one of the most disastrous things that the U.S. was ever involved in. Uh, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which happened, which brought us into the Vietnam War. I mean, the Secretary of Defense, William S. McNamara, came out decades later and said, "Yeah, it never happened. Yeah, the Gulf of Tonkin incident never happened." So that means that 57,000 American servicemen and over 1 million Vietnamese all died because of a lie. And it's all about the military contractors making money. It's all about the military industrial complex making profits. Uh, I mean, as Dwight D. Eisenhower said right before we went to Vietnam, watch out for the military industrial complex. And in fact, after JFK was assassinated, the first meeting that Lyndon Baines Johnson called was over Vietnam. And that's what initiated that entire 12-year thing. Now, okay, the gentleman in the red there, he is an actual Marine. He is an actual drill instructor from Pensacola. And all the students that he's with are real Marines. Okay. Because like I said, here again, the military had no support for this movie whatsoever. When that drill instructor got hold of that script and read it, he's right back there. He's right back there in the red. He called up to the director and said, "You need me on this thing." And of course, the director knew he was absolutely right. I mean, they wanted to be as accurate as possible to the military, even though they had zero support from the military. And you can find testimonies online, like at IMDb in the reviews section, of actual Navy officers that have submitted to the accuracy and the realism that goes on during these programs. I mean, as Douglas Day Stewart said himself, it is as tough as it looks. This is not an easy program to get to. It's funny, when I graduated from Navy boot camp, I mean, I said on that particular day, you know what? If I went down to Parris Island, South Carolina, and tried to do Marine Corps boot camp, I probably would have gotten through it. But I sure as hell wouldn't have been able to get through something like Navy SEALs or even a program like this, maybe. I mean, granted, I didn't have any interest in jets at that time. I mean, and of course, what fueled a lot of people to have interest in jets was, of course, Top Gun, which came out 4 years later from the same studio. The same producers were involved. They tried to get Louis Gossett Jr. to play in the Tom Skerritt role in Top Gun. I mean, basically, Top Gun is an officer and a gentleman with military support. Okay, let's just keep it real. Okay, let's keep it real. On that front. Now, Richard Gere, his first film was supposed to be The Lords of Flatbush, which was a film from 1974 starring Sylvester Stallone and Henry Winkler. And that was supposed to be his film debut. However, due to some altercation in the back of a car with the other actors, Richard Gere ended up leaving the film. And eventually he would make Looking for Mr. Goodbar with Diane Keaton, which is oddly difficult to find nowadays. I can't really explain that. But then of course he did American Gigolo, but he had also done Days of Heaven with Terrence Malick, which is one of the most gorgeous movies of the 1970s. But this was really the first time I think that people saw that Richard Gere could act and that he could act extremely well. And this role of Zachary Mayo, it, um, there were quite a few people that were considered. And just to give you a taste real quick on this role of Zachary Mayo that had done the rounds in Hollywood, John Denver turned the role down because he thought that the script read like a 1950s movie. I don't know exactly what he means by that. I mean, because I don't really think of From Here to Eternity when I see An Officer and a Gentleman, but I'm sure you can make even parallels between that as well. I don't know if that's what John Denver was thinking, but evidently he turned the role down for that reason. Kurt Russell also turned Zachary Mayo down. The original choice of Taylor Hackford was always Jeff Bridges, but he had an extremely busy schedule at the time. Yeah, he had an extremely busy schedule at the time, and unfortunately wasn't able to do it. And then, of course, Dennis Quaid and Christopher Reeve were also seriously considered. But the one that nearly got it and didn't was, in fact, John Travolta. And part of that is due to the fact that Douglas Day Stewart had written a 1976 television movie starring John Travolta called The Boy in the Plastic Bubble. And it was also directed by Randall Kleiser, who later directed John Travolta in Grease. And but however, it was John Travolta's agent that advised him to turn down the role. John Travolta did not decline the role himself. It was his agent. And then finally, last but not least, one other actor that was seriously considered for Zach Mayo was Eric Roberts, who, of course, whose sister Julia would later star with Richard Gere in Pretty Woman. But the problem with Eric Roberts was his manager insisted on attending meetings between him and the director. And Taylor Hackford thought, and I think rightfully so, that, oh no, this isn't going to work because, I mean, he's going to compromise what is supposed to be a very vital, very intimate director-actor relationship. So Eric Roberts didn't get the role. Now, I'm not near as I don't have near as much knowledge in music as I am with movies, but apparently in this band is Dwight Yoakam. I don't know what he looks like. I don't know what he looked like back in 1982, but apparently Dwight Yoakam is part of that band that is on the stage. I wish I could say which one he is because I don't know him. I don't know what he looks like that much, and I'm not very good at that. But yeah, Dwight Yoakam is in the band on the stage in this dance hall where all the officers are getting to meet the local beauties, or as Foley likes to refer to them as the Puget Sound Debs. And I love the fact that, of course, Debra, Puget Sound, she is the quintessential Puget Sound Deb, and her name is Debra. I love that. I absolutely love that. So that was a great bit of improvisation with Della Sera when he feels the sides of his head, even though he's completely shaved. Just little character moments that we're able to get in because of director Taylor Hackford and the actor Tony Plana which really, really add to everything. They really do. So, but and here again, so all those names I just mentioned were up for the role of Zachary Mayo, and for one reason or another, they didn't get it. When Richard Gere came in to read, the director had faith in the guy. However, at the same time, he wanted, because I mean, I think that Taylor Hackford saw a little bit of the hothead of Zachary Mayo in Richard Gere. And so he told him, well, I just want to let you know. I mean, you know that we're going to try to, like the character in the script, we're going to try to break you down to uh, to to where you're almost nothing. We are seriously going to go, Louis Gossett Jr. and myself, the director, are going to break you down to where there's almost nothing left. And Richard Gere said, "Look, I am up for the challenge. Let me do it." And so he did it. And he, I mean, this is, I think, Richard Gere's seminal performance. Even though after this he would go on to many, many, many great films. Not all great films, but all mostly, if all great performances. I mean, I particularly love Richard Gere in Primal Fear, which he held his own next to Edward Norton. And I also liked him in Red Corner. And what was, oh man. And well, it's funny because he's never been nominated for an Academy Award. And he's unfortunately now kind of blacklisted from Hollywood because of his devotion to I guess Tibet, and the fact that he's badmouthed China several times. But he's been unfortunately blackballed. But see, the funny thing is that in the past decade, since he's been blackballed from Hollywood, he's turned in some of his best work, and nobody has seen a lot of the movies that he's made. He was in a great film called Arbitrage, which came out in 2012. And then he also did a movie where he played a straight up homeless man called Time Out of Mind, which came out in 2014. In the past decade, he's contributed some of his best work, and it's kind of a shame that he's never really going to be honored or acknowledged for it. Although the one time that he won a major award was when he won Best Actor for Chicago. And I'll never forget when he did the Golden Globes, when he was at the Golden Globes and he actually accepted the award. He took his time because he actually said while he was reading a bunch of names he had scribbled down, he said, "Look, this never happens to me, so I'm just going to take my time." And people cheered. There were cheers in that audience because, like I said, it's almost like he had never existed to Hollywood up until 2002 when he did Chicago. And it was right after that. It was right after that in which he was, blackballed, and, he started getting less and less job offers. And I got a fair amount of movies with him in my collection. I mean, I have, Primal Fear. I got the Mothman Prophecies, where he was reunited with Laura Linney. I got Unfaithful, which I think is one of Adrian Lyne's best films. And he's terrific in that, opposite Diane Lane. Now, David Keith is also an interesting choice here because he's not a huge movie star, but he does have that face that you've seen in other films. Oh, let's see. Katrina, lead singer. So I guess the lead singer is Dwight Yoakam. Thank you very much for that confirmation. Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, it's like, wow, Dwight Yoakam is in this movie. Yeah, he is. Better late than never, I guess. Yeah, absolutely. And with Paula, with Debra Winger's character, much different scenario, because all those names I mentioned for Zach. I mean, you think, okay, well, some of those actors could have pulled off this role. I don't know about the list of names they had for Paula when they were trying to cast her, because originally they offered the role to Sigourney Weaver. Now, she had just come off of Alien at that time, and she did a little movie with William Hurt called Eyewitness. I don't see Sigourney Weaver in this role. And you could say that with a lot of movies that you've seen over 50 times, and say, well, I'm sorry, I do not see Sigourney Weaver in the role of Paula here. I just can't see it. Well, and then Angelica Houston was considered. And then the actress who was and also among the auditions were Rebecca De Mornay, Meg Ryan, and Gina Davis. However, who they eventually settled on in initial casting was, in fact, Jennifer Jason Leigh, who she had done a horror movie. She had done a slasher movie right before this called Eyes of a Stranger, where she played a deaf mute girl that is being stalked by a serial rapist who lives in her apartment, and her sister, played by the I forget her name, but she's in the Love Boat as the guide woman or whatever. I forget. Sorry, but she was in that in Eyes of a Stranger, and she was initially cast in the role of Paula, but when she read the script for Fast Times at Ridgemont High, that's when she decided to drop Officer and a Gentleman, and she wound up doing Fast Times at Ridgemont High for Universal, which came out within a month, probably within a few weeks of Officer and a Gentleman, and was also a big hit. But clearly it wasn't the hit that Officer and a Gentleman was. And I've always wondered if Jennifer Jason Leigh always regretted that. But it worked out well in the end for her at any rate. But yeah, so it was Jennifer Jason Leigh, and then she dropped out. And that's when they cast Debra Winger based on her performance in Urban Cowboy. I had actually interviewed the director, wife, screenwriting team, Willard Hike and Gloria Katz, for a movie that very few people remember called French Postcards. And even though Willard Hike and Gloria Katz are most famous for writing American Graffiti and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, they also wrote and directed a film called French Postcards in 1979 about these French exchange students. And Debra Winger was supposed to be the lead in that movie. And what ended up happening was they decided to go with another actress who they thought was more likable to the audience. But they liked Debra enough to where they expanded another role just for her. And let's just say that I wanted to ask him about Debra Winger, right? Because I said, look, I'm a huge fan because of Officer and a Gentleman, in terms of endearment and other movies that she's made. And they, in fact, did confirm to me that, well, like a lot of rumors, that, she is a difficult actress to work with. Now, and they had the personal experience, of course, with her, in that they liked her and they expanded a role just for her. But Debra Winger was always bummed that she didn't get the lead role in French Postcards. But what ended up happening was that Willard Hike, very, very happy with the work that Debra Winger did on French Postcards, called up John Travolta and said, hey, I think you should consider this girl, Debra Winger, to play in Urban Cowboy. And that's what happened. She ended up getting the part in Urban Cowboy, which, like American Gigolo, was a huge hit for Paramount. But the sad thing about Debra Winger in this film is that she herself is not a fan of it. The story goes is that she didn't know, or she wasn't able to negotiate what they call a no nudity clause in her contract. And so it wasn't until basically right before shooting that she realized, oh, I got to shoot a sex scene with Richard Gere fully nude. Yes. And and because of the fact that she did not negotiate in her contract for a no nudity clause, there was nothing that she could do. evidently. I mean, she apparently did not have a good enough agent or whatnot. But the thing is, Taylor Hackford wanted this film to be sexually frank. He wanted it to be sexually frank from the very beginning because, I mean, look, these are young hot shots, young, dumb, and full of cum, as they like to say, and they're just out having fun. They're just out, screwing local girls, and in their mind, just having fun before they go off to their next duty station. The women, on the other hand, have a completely different view as to how this relationship goes about, because not all of them, but a lot of times, some of these women, want to just snag a husband, and this has been going on for decades. I mean, at these naval air stations and also other places. But yeah, I mean, but the whole idea is that this is based on the school in Pensacola, Florida. There's an actual bar named TJ's that is also based on a bar in Florida. And a lot of this stuff is 100% accurate. It's 100% true. Even though the military refused to support the making of the movie, Taylor Hackford, because he served in the Peace Corps and because of the fact that he was devoted to inject a lot of visceral reality in this movie, he journeyed down to Pensacola, and the only time he was able to get away from the PR guy with the military guys was when he had to go off running with them. So whenever they did their physical training, Taylor Hackford, the director, would go and run with these guys, with these Marines, and he would ask them questions, and they all confirmed, oh yeah, I mean, this totally still goes on. This is, everything that he described in the script. Yeah, that happens. So, like I said, it's the leadership of the military that doesn't like to showcase what life is actually like in the military, and because of that, they felt the need to put a stamp of approval on every script that involves the military, which is ridiculous. And it's funny because Louis Gossett Jr., who of course was celebrated, he won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. Military bases, including the Marines, have just welcomed him with open arms wherever he is. I mean, wherever he may be, and whether it's at an embassy. I mean, the Marines go and they take care of him, and that is a testament to how much this movie is beloved in military circles. In fact, I'm going to say it right now. This is not a joke, but they played Top Gun on the ships that I served, but they never showed Officer and a Gentleman, which I thought was why. And of course, I found out later. Well, of course, because Paramount did not support the making. That the Pentagon did not support the making of the movie. Well, they don't even want like video cassette copies of it to be shown on ships. But oh yeah, they'll show Top Gun all the damn time. And look, I understand a lot of people joined the military because of Top Gun. I mean, military enlistment went up 600% after Top Gun came out, and that's why I've always looked at it as a glorified Navy commercial, and also to an extent jingoistic propaganda. And I'm going to go back to that. I promise I'm going to go back to that in a minute. I don't want to sound like I think that Top Gun is the worst movie ever made, because of course it's not. I just think it's mostly a joke. It doesn't have near the power, near the verisimilitude of Officer and a Gentleman. I think I really think that it struggles and wheezes to measure up to Officer. As I said before, the producer Don Simpson, who loved this script, he was the only one from Paramount who shepherded this project. He, like I said, after this movie became a hit, he thought to himself, why don't we do the same thing, but with military approval, with Pentagon support? And that's, when Top Gun, when that script was commissioned by, here again, three people with zero military experience, the Pentagon, they gave them aircraft carriers, like whatever you need, whatever you need. And then, of course, after the movie came out, military enlistment jumped by 600%. Well, Taylor Hackford and Richard Gere were absolutely determined to not go in that direction. This movie was never meant to showcase the military or even to inspire people to join the military and be a propaganda film for the Navy. That was never, ever their intention at all. In fact, they worked together just so it would not go into that trap. Because, I mean, here again, another thing that I think is a joke about Top Gun is apparently practically one of the co-financers of that enterprise was Diet Pepsi. But anyway, let me shut up about Top Gun because the Tides Inn, the motel that you see here, and this wonderful, gorgeous shot of Puget Sound, that hotel is still there. And they do, in fact, have a hotel room. I've never been there personally, but they do have a hotel room which has a plaque right outside the door. It's like this is the hotel room that Richard Gere and Debra Winger stayed in An Officer and Gentleman. And apparently, they've gotten a lot of revenue from that, lots of revenue. And again, there's that American Gigolo, coming up. But like I said, I mean, Richard Gere is about to become a real bona fide goddamn actor here in about a few more scenes. It's gonna bloom in front of our eyes. It's gonna blossom. Maybe not like the flowers that you just put in there in the Safeway jug, but I mean. I love these morning after scenes. I mean, in movies like this where, the characters, I mean, everything is all awkward. Like, is this going to continue? Is this not going to continue? And the thing you got to remember about Zach Mayo as a character is that, what he reveals here is a very intimate fact in that he's never had a girlfriend. He's never even had a real friend, to be honest. I mean, Sid Worley is his very first friend. But I mean, and like I said, even though, and we're going to talk, I mean, we have to mention that there's been a lot of stories that Debra Winger and Richard Gere did not get along during the making of the movie, or they in fact hated each other during the movie. The hate portion, I think, is very, very exaggerated because according to the director Taylor Hackford, they were very extremely professional when they were each other, and I think that, and he knew instinctively that they respected each other's approach to the material in a creative way. Because Debra Winger, she wasn't happy about doing this movie. I mean, she wasn't happy about the fact that she was doing nudity. It wasn't personal against Richard Gere. It was just the fact that she did not like the fact that she had to basically expose herself, and under maybe somewhat questionable conditions. And we'll get to the sex scene later. Not suggesting anything sinister because there isn't, but at the same time, the way the producer kind of treated her, it's pretty much clear. It makes you think, oh well, no wonder she did not like doing the production, and that the fact is she's always been rather embarrassed by this movie, even though it's her biggest hit. I mean, audiences around the world fell in love with her because of this movie. She got an Oscar nomination for God's sake, and yet she still dismisses the film. She still dismisses it. Now, this scene right here, and this is going to be the last time that we see David Caruso here. But I'm sure that, I mean, because he's about to drop on request. And yes, that is an actual term that they used back in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s when a cadet or a recruit told the instructor, the drill instructor, that's it, I'm done. I want out. I want out. Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, Scott, how you doing tonight? Let me do a time check here real quick. We are approximately 51 minutes. 51 minutes in timestamp. We're at the what I call the Delbert Dunker scene, and this was all based on the blueprints from Pensacola. This machine actually exists and it has a very specific purpose to where if you're in the middle of the ocean, you're in a jet and you crash into the ocean, how the hell are you going to get out of the cockpit? How are you going to know where to go? Because everything is going to be all messed up. Your senses, your bearings are going to be totally out of whack and everything. So, but I love this quote that Foley said right here. Could be the grade or some little flaw in your character that comes out under stress. Douglas Day Stewart, that was a meta quote right there. That was a meta piece of dialogue because he's, like I said, he's essentially telling Richard Gere, I'm going to find a flaw in your character, man. Just wait. We're coming to you. We're coming to you eventually. And of course, Richard Gere has to give this very, very cocky smile after he gets out. It's like you son of a bitch. How you doing, Planet CHH? Yeah, this is my boy Christian. I love what he's done with his channel with Planet CHH. If you love horror, you need to be subscribed to him. Please do. Glad you can make it tonight. I mean, if you want to join us, we're 42 minutes in an Officer and a Gentleman. But great to see you, Christian. Great to see you come around here. And of course, Lisa Eilbacher, who plays Seeger in this movie. I mean, she's really good. The thing about Seeger, though, is, of course, and we're going to see the scene later where she eventually gets over the wall. But believe it or not, she was the most physically fit of all the actors. And of course, in the story, though, her character, she needs to work on her upper body strength. It's unfortunately something a lot of women have to deal with when they go through these programs, and and she has to basically fake not being able to climb over that wall. But look, she pulls it off, and she pulls it off beautifully. And I love what she said in the commentary that that there are three major roles for women in this movie when usually there's only one, and that's something to absolutely consider, and why this movie was such a massive hit with both men and women. I mean, it was just one of those, as Louis Gossett Jr. said in the documentary. It's one of those kismets when lightning strikes once and everything falls into play. I mean, but here again, despite the fact that Paramount did not like this movie, they did not support the making of this movie. For 8 long years, this had gestated in the Hollywood system. And when most people think that this is almost like the quintessential Hollywood romance, oh no, this is not Love Story. This is not this is not that kind of stuff. But anyway, I mean, we have to talk about David Caruso before he leaves the screen. But this film was, of course, shot in Washington State. And of course, right after Officer and Gentleman wrapped, he had another role that's very famous to audiences, which is Mitch in First Blood, starring Sylvester Stallone. In that movie, of course, he keeps on telling the other his fellow cops, aren't you blind? Can't you see this guy is insane? But he's really good in both of those movies. And after An Officer and a Gentleman, he would be in Thief of Hearts, starring Stephen Bauer, which was actually written and directed by Douglas Day Stewart, the screenwriter. And that is a very weird movie. It just came out on Blu-ray, and David Caruso essentially plays the buddy of Stephen Bauer, who basically robs. He plays a cat burglar who robs like rich women's houses at night, and he starts reading this one woman's diary, and then he starts to court that woman using his secret intimate knowledge. The movie itself isn't great. It's definitely an interesting story for an erotic thriller, but it's really not that good. But Daniels, who just DOR'd here, but he was in that as Stephen Bauer's buddy. And he also later was in the Taylor Hackford film Proof of Life, starring Meg Ryan and Russell Crowe. And Harold Sylvester here, I mean, I primarily know him. He had a supporting role in Inner Space, which is the Joe Dante cop thriller from the 80s with Dennis Quaid and Martin Short. And he more or less played he didn't play a villain, but he played like the antagonist to the hero in that. I see here he's desperate to get a belt buckle because he can't be kicked out over a belt buckle. I mean, he's got a family to think about and everything. Yeah. But, Louis Gossett was listening the whole time. And he just strolls on in, checking them out, about to play his ace card here. It's brilliant work by Louis Gossett Jr. here. I mean, he was only the third actor in history to get an Academy Award, the third black actor in history, following Hattie McDaniel in Gone with the Wind and Sidney Poitier, who we just lost this year for Lilies of the Field. Yeah. But what I especially love about his performance is how he makes race irrelevant. Because the thing is that, okay, originally they wanted Jack Nicholson in this role. Now, okay, look, Katrina, Jack Nicholson is her favorite actor, just to let everybody know. And so, look, Jack Nicholson can do anything. He, no matter what the role is, and he played a Navy enlisted man before. He played a first-class petty officer in The Last Detail, the great Hal Ashby movie from 1973, which I'll be doing a commentary on next year. And of course, A Few Good Men, where he gives that famous line, "You can't handle the truth." I don't deny that Jack Nicholson would have played a Marine here exceptionally well, but he turned down the role. I don't know the reasoning behind that. And well, it's interesting because one of the people I mentioned that was up for Paula was Angelica Houston, who of course was dating Jack Nicholson around this time. But what happened was that when Jack Nicholson said no, the producers wanted to go with the actor Mandy Patinkin. Now, he is famous for basically one line from The Princess Bride, which is, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die." So the producers wanted him to play Sergeant Foley. I've never seen that audition. I cannot stipulate what they saw in him for that role. This was right before he did Yentl, by the way, with Barbra Streisand, where what I always find hilarious about that casting is that, Barbra Streisand knew he was a Tony Award-winning singer and yet never let him sing. But anyway, going beyond that, I honestly don't know what the producers saw in Mandy Patinkin that thought he could have pulled off this role. Maybe he could have. I don't know. Douglas A. Stewart. I'm sorry. Taylor Hackford objected to Mandy Patinkin, and thus when they did the research and found out that a lot of drill instructors are in fact black, they started looking for a black actor to fill this role, and so they found Louis Gossett Jr., where his agent called up the producer and said, "Okay, you know as well as I do that a lot of drill instructors in the military are black. Let me send Louis Gossett Jr. down. You tell him that he cannot do the part." And so Louis Gossett Jr. walked into this hallway. There's about 30 to 50 white male actors, reading the script, going over the lines, and he's huffing and puffing all the way past them. He's getting very disgruntled. He goes in to see Taylor Hackford, and Taylor just automatically says, "You have the part." Boom. Damn. So that is one of the great. I love that story. I really do love that story. But here again, Louis Gossett Jr. had done movies all throughout the 1970s. I mean, one of his first movies was, of course, The Landlord, which is a great film with Beau Bridges and Lee Grant, directed by Hal Ashby from 1970. That's a brilliant satire on race relations in New York City. And he also played in the movie The Deep as this Caribbean guy looking for this buried treasure and kidnapping Nick Nolte and Jacqueline Bisset to help him find this treasure. I really like The Deep. And if you're a fan of this movie, get this Blu-ray because they have an audio commentary by the actress Ileana Douglas, which is the reason why I picked this up. And it's based on a novel by Peter Benchley, who also wrote Jaws and everything. And Louis Gossett Jr. is terrific in that as well. But here we reach the most important moment in the movie, next to the ending, of course, where Louis Gossett Jr. has successfully broken Richard Gere's character down to nothing. He's tired of the bullshit. He's tired of him not being honest with him. And, like, what the hell are you doing here? What do you think you're doing here? And we have this devastating, very powerful moment, which Douglas Day Stewart, given full credit, he wrote every line of dialogue in this movie. When Richard Gere breaks down and says, "I have no place else to go," I mean, it echoes, it resonates, you understand exactly what he's going through now and why he can't leave this program, because who knows what would happen to him eventually if he doesn't finish this program. Louis Gossett Jr. knows he has what it takes to get through it. He just needs to change his attitude. And he was now 100% successful in Richard Gere changing his attitude, and thus lets him stay in the program. Now, I should mention also that Paramount, later on in the 1990s, they released another classic, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, called Wayne's World 2, in which Mike Myers wanted to start a Wayne Stock music festival in the tradition of Woodstock. And in Wayne's World 2, there's this training montage where they need to try to grab the microphone off the stand. I mean, it's so silly. But Chris Farley comes out and tries to get the microphone, and he fails because they're shooting tennis balls at him, and he just falls down and everything. Starts crying like hell. And Mike Myers comes out to him and says, he takes off his sunglasses, and he says, "Why are you still in this program? Why don't you just quit?" And Chris Farley is just bawling his eyes out and just says in front of Mike Myers, "Because I got no place else to go." I mean, it's one of my favorite moments in Wayne's World 2. And, like, you can execute a spoof that respects the original the original source, while at the same time being just so damn funny. So I want to applaud Mike Myers and the late Chris Farley for that brilliant Officer and a Gentleman spoof, coming 11 years after the fact. And now we get to, excuse me, I'm going to need to drink some water now, especially as the very steamy sex scene is about to start here. Yeah, definitely need to cool down now. At any rate, so just a few comments here. I didn't realize this was filmed in Washington. Yeah. Oregon here, born in Seattle. Did I miss that it's set in Seattle as well? Yep. In the opening frame, it says Seattle, Washington. And I thought this was an East Coast film for some reason. I can understand that. Daniel Shawn, always great to see you, sir. Absolutely. Gere is much better in this movie than I've seen him, much more in natural acting. Absolutely. Absolutely. And just to let everybody know, we are approximately 1 hour and 6 minutes in. And all right, this sex scene became infamous in Hollywood because now, as you can see, look at the bottom of the screen. And you can clearly see that Debra Winger is moving her hips over Richard Gere here. Very, very steamy scene. And it's only at the end of the shot do we draw back and see her buttocks right before one final thrust. And then the director changes positions and shoots from another side. Well, an Officer and a Gentleman, when it was submitted to the Motion Picture Association of America, it got the X rating specifically for this scene and precisely because of Debra Winger's hips moving up and down on top of Richard Gere. It was that pelvic thrust that was freaking out the MPAA, apparently. Now, some people think that Taylor Hackford actually had to cut this scene down so that they could get an R. Not true. All they had to do was raise the frame by like a half an inch, where we didn't see her hips moving as well. Because originally the shot was as far back as you could possibly see, where you actually see Debra Winger actually grinding on Richard Gere. And this is one of the steamiest sex scenes in Hollywood history, and I stand by that. The only other film in 1982 which may give Officer and Gentleman a run for its money in memorable sex scenes may have been the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sandal Bergman and Conan the Barbarian. Maybe. But look, I've seen a lot of movies, and yes, I've seen my fair share of like erotic thrillers and erotic dramas. None of them come even close to this scene right here. And, you know, as I said before, when I had the DVD copy of this in the military, a lot of people would ask for this movie. They would ask to borrow the movie because they did not have a copy on board the ship. So let's put it this way. My DVD collection became a little famous on the ship because I had a lot of movies that the studios would not supply. This film, An Officer and a Gentleman, was without a doubt the #1 requested movie of my entire 1,000+ DVD collection. That is not an exaggeration. That is not hyperbolic in any way. And on top of all that, pun intended, a lot of people came back and said and testified to the fact that whoever they watched it with, afterward they had great sex. I'm being 100% honest with that. And I think after you see this scene, it makes perfect sense. And, you know, here again, this scene, as steamy as it was one of the reasons why the studio, they just didn't get it. They didn't get why this film was going to resonate with audiences so much at the time. I mean, before this came out, I mean, the producer came back after the screening with the studio and said, the movie sucks. They hate it. It's just, I shake my head now. It's like, why? I mean, and on top of all that, and this needs to be mentioned before this scene ends, this very moving scene, very romantic scene, is that the producer, Don Simpson, allegedly told Debra Winger right before shooting took place, you know, there may be somebody else for the part. I need somebody who's fuckable, and you're not fuckable enough. Look, Don, all I'm saying is I think that she proved your sorry ass wrong with that scene that we just saw. And here again, it completely makes sense why Debra Winger does not have a high opinion of this movie. I think that she even avoids trying to talk to people about it. She is not happy about being in this movie at all. And here again, you understand that interaction with the producer, and that she didn't want to do the sex scene. I can understand. Okay, I can completely understand why, from her point of view, despite the fact it's her most famous role, it's her most famous performance. She got an Oscar nomination for this performance, something that Richard Gere was actually a tiny bit jealous of, because Richard Gere had a bit more screen time. But Debra Winger is so moving and so uh, not adorable. Adorable is not the right word, but she's real as hell. I mean, she feels like a real working class girl in this town in Washington with no future, and she is seriously and genuinely fallen in love with Richard Gere. So much so that she, in fact, brought him to meet her parents. And automatically, you can see a lot of subtle details in the writing here. What the hell is going on here? What is up with this family? I mean, you have the father being solemn and not really saying much except to divert his daughter's attention away from the guy in uniform sitting at their table. You know. uh, what about the shower scene in Porky's? That was 81? And you know what? I mean, I can understand people being embarrassed by that scene and how it's so raunchy. It's almost look. It's a very funny scene. It's still a very funny scene, and Porky's does have funny scenes, even though I don't love the movie itself. What a jerk, Don! Eat a bag of. Yeah, yeah. Don Simpson actually said that. Yes, 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 Scott. This is in fact Grace Zabriskie in this early role here. Yeah, he doesn't mean anything by it, Zach. He just staring at you, just looking at you, and judging you like, what do you think you're doing, dude? And of course, the daughter has to break everything and say, "You want some more chicken, Zach?" It's like, no, no. After the sex scene in this movie, the audiences in the theater were 100% on board every step of the way throughout the second half of this movie, and they're completely invested now into these characters' lives. And here again, I mean, granted, I mean, at the time, Richard Gere and Debra Winger may have been 1,000-watt movie stars, but also, honestly, I mean, like the director said, there were no movie stars, nothing Hollywood on this set. Everybody was a worker. Everybody was a blue collar, working class person, because all his movies, Taylor Hackford said that all his movies are all about working class relationships. And that's what this movie is ultimately about. It's almost the ultimate blue collar drama in that sense. When a lot of people think of it as the stereotypical Hollywood love story, here again, complete opposite. This is a film that no Hollywood studio wanted to make, not one. The only reason why it got distribution through Paramount is because Don Simpson was determined to make this movie, and he shepherded this. This was his baby. He was determined to deliver this movie, regardless of what Michael Eisner, the president of Paramount, said, or Charles Bluedorn, who owned Gulf and Western, which is the company that owned Paramount. Don Simpson was the only one on board. And like I said, there was a lot of, I mean, this shoot was plagued by inclement weather. I mean, there's a lot of scenes, some more noticeable than others, where they got a lot of rain on the shoot. And there was so many issues and so many problems that threatened to shut down production. And then ultimately for the result for the studio to come back and say, after they saw the final cut, and say, "No, this is garbage. We hate this." It's like, oh my God, what are you going to do? And that picture of the Navy officer that Debra Winger just showed Richard Gere, that is in fact the screenwriter Douglas Day Stewart. Yeah. perfect place to have a little screenwriter cameo. And I mean, that's the thing. I mean, he wrote this script from first word to last word, and the studios, they were just scared to death of shooting this. But I mean, it managed to work out so well that, uh, what became out of this was that Don Simpson then decided to do the same, more or less the same story, but with Pentagon and military approval, and that's what ultimately led to Top Gun. And we haven't even gotten to the biggest parallel between the two yet. We're still getting there. We're still getting there. I love Debra Winger in this scene. I mean, she's and okay. Going back to the relationship between Richard Gere and Debra Winger, is that I mean, years later, Debra Winger actually gave an award to Richard Gere at a festival about a decade ago. So, she doesn't hate Richard Gere. I mean, even at the time, I don't believe that she hated Richard Gere or hated working with Richard Gere. But the thing is that I mean, you're an actress and you're put in this position uh, where you're expected to be genuine in romantic love scenes, and it's very intimidating. But the thing is, of course, they just had simply different styles of acting and different approaches to how to do certain scenes. I mean, and this is a heartbreaking moment right here where Debra Winger, is constantly trying to get in touch with Zach, and he can't because he's just trying to let the relationship fizzle out. He's just trying to let the relationship fizzle out and not let it get more complicated than it has to be. But of course, what Richard Gere has no clue of is that Debra Winger's character is seriously in love with him. And he has no idea. Because here again, he looked at this relationship completely different from the very beginning. And I've been a fan of Debra Winger ever since this movie. I mean, been out of the spotlight for a number of years, number of decades. As a matter of fact, I mean, right after this, she did Terms of Endearment for Paramount, where she got another Academy Award nomination, and reportedly did not get along working with Shirley MacLaine during that movie as well. And that's another movie where, well, okay, spoilers. I mean, her character actually dies at the end of the movie, and the most famous shot is, of course, Shirley MacLaine screaming at the end, give my daughter the shot. She needs a shot. She's in pain because she's dying from cancer and everything. But after that, Debra Winger made a lot of, I guess you could say, low profile movies. I mean, she did movies like Legal Eagles with Robert Redford and Black Widow, the Bob Rafelson movie with Teresa Russell. All of which she was very good in. And I'm going to do another movie later in the year. I'm going to do another commentary later in the year for a movie she did in 1984 called Mike's Murder, which was from the same director of Urban Cowboy. And it was another script that Hollywood did not like because it had to deal with, the drug underworld in the Hollywood in Los Angeles, and it was massively compromised in the editing room. But that's a movie where Debra Winger is the actual star, and I do want to do a commentary later on in the year for that as well, because, like I said, I'm such a huge Debra Winger fan. And so we haven't really talked about David Keith much. I wanted to I need to double check a few things about him real quick. I've been managed to go along through this entire commentary without checking anything else online. But okay, so David Keith, he had started out in The Great Santini and The Rose, the movie with Bette Midler in 1979. But it was because of a Robert Redford movie called Brubaker, which he had a supporting role in. And that's what Taylor Hackford saw him in and thought that he would be a perfect Sid Worley in this role. Now, after An Obstinate Gentleman, he did a movie set in a boarding school called the Lords of Discipline. Um, yeah, it was actually set at a military academy, and David Keith is actually the star of Lords of Discipline. And later on, he also did the Jack Nicholson sequel to Chinatown called the Two Jakes. He was also in Major League Two and some others. But the thing about David Keith is that in the year 2000, in a very wonderful nod to his role in An Obstinate Gentleman as Sid Worley, he actually did end up playing a Navy officer in two movies. And I remember when I saw both of them in the theater, and I just said to myself, "Oh my God, he's back! Sid Worley is back now, actually a naval officer." And those two movies, if you don't remember, are in fact U-571, which is the submarine thriller with Matthew McConaughey, and the other one is Men of Honor, starring Cuba Gooding Jr. and Robert De Niro. In fact, David Keith played the captain of the ship, which Carl Brashear, Cuba Gooding's character, was serving on when he got his leg almost completely chopped off by the rope when they were doing maneuvers and everything. And it's based on the true story of the first black diver who became a Master Chief. Really good film. I mean, despite the fact that Cuba Gooding Jr.'s reputation has gone down the toilet in recent years, it's still a great film. And Robert De Niro plays in the movie as well as a very racist Navy chief who comes to embrace Carl Brashear's drive and determination and downright courage and honor, as that film is very specifically about. And even though the military did support the making of Men of Honor, it's actually really good. I mean, it was released by 20th Century Fox back in the year 2000. But yeah, I mean, David Keith actually did those two other movies. And Lisa Eilbacher, she was later in Beverly Hills Cop. She played Eddie Murphy's friend, who, when he comes out to L.A. and she's working at the art gallery, where, of course, Serge is also working, and eventually they would all kind of team up to help find who murdered Eddie Murphy's buddy in that. Now, as far as the soundtrack to An Obstinate Gentleman is concerned, the tune that you hear in this particular scene is a song from Dire Straits. Just one second. Yeah, Dire Straits, Mark Knopfler's Tunnel of Love. And Taylor Hackford had always intended to use like a rock and roll type of score and like several rock songs scattered throughout the soundtrack. I mean, look, there is a love story attached to this movie, so you have to make sure you get the music right. And even though we heard Chestnuts before, like with the Dwight Yoakam band and everything, where we heard like Feelings and Tie a Yellow Ribbon Around the Old Oak Tree and old Chestnuts like that. Amazingly, the scene early on where the girls and the recruits meet for the first time, where they comment on Sid Worley's bald head. They were talking to a woman that was holding a bunch of records, and one of the records that you saw on the top was from, of course, the singer Pat Benatar. Well, the scene earlier where Debra Winger gets out of the car and goes to the opposite side, that was actually Pat Benatar singing a song called "Treat Me Right." And there's also, you hear ZZ Top on the soundtrack, the Sir Douglas Quartet, Lee Ritenour. But the music score, of course, was done by Jack Nitzsche, who would later, he passed away at the age of 63 in the year 2000. And he had done movies before this, like he had done Performance with Mick Jagger. back in 1970. He also composed the movie To the Exorcist with Mike Oldfield, as well as One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where he was nominated not only for an Oscar, but also a Grammy for his music in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He also did a movie that I'm a huge fan of called Heroes with Henry Winkler and Harrison Ford and Sally Field. Huge fan of that. He also did a movie called Blue Collar with Richard Pryor, Paul Schrader's Hardcore, which the director also did Blue Collar. And then he also scored William Friedkin's Cruising, where Al Pacino has to go undercover to find a serial killer who's been murdering guys in like the leather bars of New York City at that time. And also in the same year of 1982, Jack Nitzsche also did the scores for Personal Best with Jill Frazier, a movie with Mariel Hemingway. And then finally, Canary Row, another film with Debra Winger starring Nick Nolte, which is based on the John Steinbeck novella. But one person who we haven't talked about yet is, of course, Lisa Blount, who plays the very manipulative Lynette, who, of course, is playing around with the idea, okay, is she pregnant? Is she not pregnant? And giving him some like weird thoughts and making him very, very uncomfortable because, you know, and it's very clear that that he likes her more than she likes him, almost. But she's doing this as kind of a trump card to ensure that she doesn't lose this guy. And like I said, what she wants is that ring. She wants that ring on her finger to let her know that she's the wife of an aviator. That's been her whole mission from the very beginning. Debra Winger, not so much. I mean, Debra Winger, you know, actually develops genuine feelings for Richard Gere, where in this case, it's the complete opposite. I mean, here again, I mean, the movie ultimately becomes, you know, these relationships develop because of coupling and complication, and and they're beautifully developed by Douglas Day Stewart in his script. But as far as the two Lisas are concerned, Lisa Albacher is about to go over the wall finally, and like I said, pretend to be not having much upper body strength when in fact she's the most she has the most athleticism from anybody in the group here. In real life, she actually did. But she didn't do a lot of movies after Officer and Gentleman. She did 10 to Midnight with Charles Bronson. And then she was in Beverly Hills Cop as Jenny Summers, of course. She was also in Leviathan, the 1989 movie with Peter Weller. And then her last movie was the Pierce Brosnan thriller Live Wire, starring Ron Silver and Ben Cross. That was the very last movie she did, and she did a little bit of television after that, and then basically just retired from the spotlight, as you can say. But this is practically the only one. This and Beverly Hills Cop, which of course Don Simpson would of course later produce with Jerry Bruckheimer, and they became like the most powerful producers in Hollywood at that point. Those two films are really her only recognizable roles. But she was interviewed for the 25th anniversary documentary, which is available on YouTube. You can find it on YouTube and watch it after the movie if you're so inclined. And it's a wonderful, wonderful documentary. It really covers everything you need to know in like 30 minutes with actual interviews with everybody except for Debra Winger. You know, very sad, but here again, understandable. And the only other one that was not interviewed for the documentary was, in fact, Lisa Blount, who plays Lynette. And excuse me. And the thing about Lisa Blount is that She didn't do a lot of movies as an actress after this. I mean, she was in the cult horror film Dead and Buried, which came out in 1981. And then she did a few movies in 1985, like Radioactive Dreams, which is also a cult film, as well as Cut and Run, a crazy, crazy jungle movie that she did with the director of Cannibal Holocaust, Rogero Deodato. And it also stars Willie Ames and Richard Lynch and Michael Berryman from The Hills Have Eyes. And then she did Prince of Darkness for John Carpenter, Femme Fatale, the 1991 film, Great Balls of Fire about Johnny Lee Lewis, starring Dennis Quaid in that role. And she was also in Blind Fury with Rutger Hauer. So she's done her fair share of cult films. But the thing about Lisa Blount is that eventually in 2001, she would win an Academy Award for Best Short Film Live Action for a movie that she did called The Accountant, starring Ray McKinnon. And she was the producer of that movie. It was a 40-minute movie, and it won the Oscar. It won her the Oscar for Best Short Subject at the 74th Academy Awards in 2002, approximately 20 years after An Officer and a Gentleman. However, very, very sadly, very, very sadly, she would die in 2010 at the age of 53. She was very, very young. And she wasn't interviewed for the documentary, even though the documentary was produced before her death. I don't know if she objected to being interviewed or what the story was, but unfortunately, her and Debra Winger are the only ones who are not interviewed for the documentary. But it's still well worth watching. Like I said, it's on YouTube. Yeah, well, Worley's now the one beginning to break apart, and unfortunately break apart to the point where there's no going back. Now, here's another thing that they do in the program, that they built this entire set that it still exists at Warden Park, where they shot this in Washington State. So you could actually go and visit and actually see this actual set. But yeah, so the idea of this is that, of course, when they get so high in the air and they, of course, take off their oxygen, you know, here again, they have to remain alert and they have to get through these kind of exercises without falling apart and breaking apart, or else, the mission isn't going to go well. So now the voice that you hear over the control, that is in fact Ed Begley Jr., who dubbed over the actor who was in the pressure chamber. The one shot that you did see him, you could tell that his line was actually dubbed over by Ed Begley Jr., for those that recognize him. Uh-oh. Oh, no, this is not good. Poor Worley, he's going insane. Oh, no, I got a girlfriend who's pregnant, but I also have this woman who I'm supposed to be getting married to back home. Oh, no. It's too much to handle for Sid Worley, very, very sadly. But I've said before that Douglas Day Stewart based this all on his actual experiences in the military. And look, this happens practically every time a new unit of recruits goes to boot camp. These things happen. Maybe not every single class, but almost every single class. I mean, there's always some kind of tragic event that marks the class as everybody's getting into the home stretch. Something happens where somebody that's well liked finally gets booted, or and it's unfathomable at that point, but you just have to keep going. Oh. And so, I mean, when he comes back out in civilian clothes, that's when you can tell, oh no, after 11 weeks, all he had to do was 1 or 2 more weeks, and he got out right before they were expected to graduate. Now, and of course, Louis Gossett Jr. knows full well what he's going through, and it doesn't matter. I mean, and he even said that that it was well. David Keith is going to tell Richard Gere in the scene, I went to him. It wasn't the other way around, which of course Richard Gere is assuming right here. It still happened to you too, mayonnaise. Oh. What did you call me? But the funny thing is that Louis Gossett Jr., he was very humbled when he got the Oscar and everything. He did not expect to get the award, but he is still flabbergasted to this day that why Richard Gere wasn't nominated, and I agree with him. I mean, Debra Winger, Richard Gere, and Louis Gossett Jr., all three of their performance. And here again, strong supporting cast. But all of these leads are exceptionally good in their roles. I mean, Richard Gere, here again, we just saw him blossom as an actor right in front of our eyes and everything. Oh, yeah. Gonna catch up with some comments here. Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little behind. Shirley MacLaine and Winger seem like a pretty toxic mix just on paper. Yeah, I agree with that. But, I mean, they were still great. I mean, they were still great in the movie. Is he related to Brian Keith? You know what? I don't think that he is. I don't think that he is, but I can go ahead and double check here real quick. I was wondering that myself because I tend to get them a little confused at times. No, I mean, it doesn't say that he, no, they're not related. So you would never know it from this movie that she and Gere were like oil and vinegar. She referred to him as a wooden actor. Yeah, I know. And she also even reportedly said that he was a brick wall. But look, going back to Top Gun, I mean, the point of the matter is that despite the fact that they were like oil and vinegar, Richard Gere and Debra Winger have 1,000 times much more chemistry than Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis have in Top Gun. And just to give you an idea, when Top Gun was shown in front of a test audience right before its release, the audience had one massive complaint. There was no love scene. There was no love scene between Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis. So what they did was they brought the actors back 6 months later when she had a completely different haircut, and they literally forced them to shoot a love scene. And here again, not only is Kelly McGillis gay in real life, not that that really matters in terms of getting the scene done, but I mean, she had a completely different hair color. So here again, Paramount, trying to pull a fast one on the audience. I did not buy the Kelly McGillis Tom Cruise relationship in Top Gun one iota. It was a completely forced relationship. Unlike Richard Gere's and Debra Winger's, which is, it builds naturally. And like I said, they're professional enough as actors to where the acting shines through and overcomes any hostility or disdain they might have had for each other. And that's what I'm saying. I believe the director in that they were professional, even if they didn't hang out together when they weren't working. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. She's pretty right about that, in my opinion. The iron is he's so much better in An Officer and Gentleman than any other movie I've seen. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, really? I was an extra in Men of Honor playing saxophone in the band in the ballroom scene. Well, you know what? Next time I see the movie, I'm gonna look for you, Scott. I'm gonna look for you and not forget that. Absolutely. That's amazing. That is absolutely awesome. This and Primal Fear. Yes, Primal Fear is the other one where, like, where was that Oscar nomination? Seriously, Richard Gere was amazing in Primal Fear. Although I think this movie really suits him. Yep. De Niro had me removed from the Oh, that is a story to share later. Yeah. You know what? I might do a commentary on Men of Honor later this year just to hear that story. That's amazing. I remember when the Searching for Debra Winger documentary came out. I had no idea she'd even quit during movies. Yeah. The actress Patricia Arquette, who she was in movies like After Hours and everything. She did a documentary called Searching for Debra Winger. I was actually going to mention that during the commentary, Jamie. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a very good documentary where we discover why Debra Winger essentially disappeared, because the last high-profile movie she did was, I think, back in '93 when she did Shadowlands with Anthony Hopkins, which was about C.S. Lewis, the author of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and the relationship that he had later on in his life with the woman that Debra Winger's character, Debra Winger played. So I haven't seen her on screen for so long. That guitar sound is iconic. I've never heard this before. Knew it was Knopfler immediately. Yes. Mm-hmm. I'm not a big fan of the score of this movie. The cheesy arrangements of Up Where We Belong bugged me a little, just a bit much. You know what? Look, the audience loved it, and we're going to get into that, of course. But yeah, the audience loved it. Yep, Cannery Row with Nick Nolte and Debra Winger. That's a bad way to bug out. Tough to come back from that one. Yeah, absolutely. This scene is so cringy. She's going to drop him like a bad habit. Oh, yeah. You're absolutely right. Yep. Yeah. Now, okay. This scene right here, that is a real ring. And he actually swallows the ring 10 times. Now, it had a string on it, so he was able to pull it back out easily after every single take. But he actually did 10 takes of this, of swallowing this real ring. How Taylor Hackford put him up to this 10 times, I don't know. But bless David Keith for selling it. Yeah. And Taylor Hackford says on the commentary on the Blu-ray, you know, that scene pretty much he basically commits suicide in that very scene. I mean, even though he does physically hang himself later, it's in that moment that he actually does pretty much kill himself right there. And Lisa Blount, and here again, we were talking about Lisa Blount earlier, that, you know, she passed away much too young. She was 53, and you know, she won an Academy Award for a short film later in her career. You just hate her so much at this moment. And I mean, here again, here's a rare instance. This was one of the very first movies where the word cunt was used. And I think it was used very appropriately. I mean, as appropriate as that word could ever be used in a movie. But Richard Gere does actually drop the word here in front of Lisa Blount. Oh, man. Just thinking about having someone having to do that 10 times. Wow. Commitment. Yeah, that is 100% commitment right there. He swallowed that damn ring 10 times. Yep. But I love Lisa Blount's performance, even if you despise her character. Now, she was actually in a car accident during the making of this movie. Here again, this entire production had problems left and right. You know, this production was going to threaten to collapse at any moment throughout throughout. And she, 2 weeks before shooting was supposed to be completed, she gets in a car accident. She messes up her collarbone. You know, she has bruises on her chest, which you can't really see. But she was messed up. She was really messed up. Debra Winger went to her bedside and stood by her for 2 weeks. And then eventually Taylor Hackford came to her and said, look, you need to finish the movie. I mean, we got the movie may not even be finished if you can't get in here to do it. And look, I understand that you're going through all this pain, but look, you were in the car accident. We still need you to come in and finish your work. And she did it. And she did it like a fucking trooper. Okay. So I have a lot of respect for Lisa Blount and her performance in this movie, regardless of how you feel about her character. Okay. I mean, she's wonderful. And here again, just died way too young, way too young. And you wouldn't want to be on the other end of swallowing that ring. Suicide is right. And I think I already mentioned that Douglas Day Stewart wrote The Boy in the Plastic Bubble with John Travolta. Well, he also wrote the Randall Kleiser film, The Blue Lagoon, starring Christopher, I forget his name now, but also Brooke Shields. The very famous Brooke Shields movie where there are scenes of teenagers having sex on a tropical island. And of course, it was very controversial for that reason. But give Douglas Day Stewart credit. He was very, very faithful to the 1903 novel by Henry DeVere Stackpole, on which that movie is based on. He was very faithful to his writing and particularly his dialogue. But then years later, and here's the thing, I will always love and respect and salute Douglas Day Stewart for writing An Officer and a Gentleman and the movie being made. But eventually he tried to adapt Scarlet Letter with Demi Moore and Gary Oldman, and that was a complete disaster. I mean, aside from the fact that they changed the ending where the Indians come in to save the lead characters when they're supposed to suffer due to their sin. I mean, it's one of those classic movies that books that Hollywood will never get right. You know, it's like Huckleberry Finn. They will never understand it or get it, and they will never get it right. Now, David Keith, when this movie premiered, he actually went to go see the movie with his mother, who was standing next to him. And when this moment came, when he commits suicide and he dies, here again, like Top Gun, the best friend dies in both movies. The best friend dies. But anyway, his mother was so crushed by this moment that she put her face in her hands, and just she essentially watched her son commit suicide on screen. And I mean, could you imagine how much that must have affected her? I mean, you know, even despite the happiness of the ending, which we're about to get to here very soon. I mean, yeah, I mean, how do you deal with that? That's really hard to watch, you know, your own son just commit suicide on screen. So it must have been very, very difficult. Just checking my notes here real quick. Give me a moment, because I know we're do a timestamp real quick. We are 1 hour and 49 minutes into An Officer and a Gentleman. So we have approximately 15 minutes left to go. But I wanted to mention a few other random trivia bits here. Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention at the beginning that when they were in the Philippines that they had to deal with a typhoon. And it was pretty much straight out of The Rains Came, the 1939 picture, which I always found interesting. But just one moment here. I just want to get out of the way a few other random trivia bits. Producer Don Simpson unsuccessfully demanded that the ballad Up Where We Belong be cut from the film, saying the song is no good and it isn't a hit. The song later became the #1 song on the Billboard chart and won the Academy Award for Best Song, like Berlin's Take My Breath Away years later. And the song was released a few months later. It peaked at number 29 on the Billboard charts. That was a song that Don Simpson wanted in place of Up Where We Belong, called On the Wings of Love by Jeffrey Osborne. But I think audiences, well, see, the song, it also won the Golden Globe, as well as the BAFTA, and also the Grammy for Best Original Song. Now, I like the song personally. It's not my favorite Joe Cocker song, and Jennifer Warnes, who did the song with Joe Cocker, she had won an Oscar only 3 years before this for the haunting theme from Norma Ray, starring Sally Field. She won an Oscar for that. It Goes Like It Goes. Yeah, that's the name of the song. But when this song was nominated for the BAFTA, it was up against Every Sperm is Sacred from Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. And reportedly, when they got to announcing the winner for Best Original Song at the BAFTAs, obviously there were a lot of Monty Python fans that wanted Every Sperm is Sacred to win. And so when Up Where We Belong won, there was like a hush. There not booze per se, but you could definitely tell that the British audience was very disappointed that Every Sperm is Sacred did not win for Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. Mm. And for this sequence right here, Louis Gossett Jr. and Richard Gere all learned the karate for this specific sequence. Although what's interesting is that, because as you're going to see, Louis Gossett Jr. actually kicks Mayo in his balls, and it causes him to basically collapse and hold on to his genitalia because he's in pain and everything. Now, in real life, it was Richard Gere who actually kicked Louis Gossett Jr. in the nuts. And as a result, Gossett Jr. just left the set, and he would not return for 2 more days. So they actually got a double for a couple of shots in this movie, particularly at the moment where he does kick Richard Gere in the balls. And we're going to see that soon. But there was, in fact, a double use for this scene, even though Louis Gossett Jr. had learned all the moves. Although, to be perfectly honest, he was struggling with the moves more than Richard Gere was. Damn. And see, look, the whole psychology of the scene is that Louis Gossett Jr. believes in Richard Gere's character. He doesn't want him to quit the program. The entire class is very upset. They love Sid Worley. And look, Louis Gossett Jr. wanted Sid Worley to make it. He really did. I mean, it's like losing a child. It's like, the point is he wants all of these men to succeed, men and women to succeed in what they're doing with this program. But, here again, he also has a huge important task, which is to weed out vulnerabilities, to weed out their weaknesses and everything. And, what happened was very, very tragic. The class is fully aware of the repercussions and everything, and it's completely affecting everybody in the final stretch before graduation. So technically, Louis Gossett Jr. won this match just because he walks off the mat. But he basically gives Richard Gere the choice. Look, if you really want to quit, you can do so. It's all on you. And after being basically shut down and told to cool off, he eventually agrees to graduate. Yeah, here they're playing "Anchors Away," which is the official Navy song. It is not in the Navy by the Village People, I'm sorry to say. Although there were a lot of people in the Navy that loved that song just as much as "Anchors Away," and they would actually sing it during the marching. Now, as stated in the beginning, Robert Loggia never appears again as Zach's father. however, in the original script, uh, he was supposed to meet with Richard Gere during some points of the training, and he's even supposed to appear in this very last sequence of graduation. And when Richard Gere actually tells Della Serrar that he's going to wait out into the field for his first salute, he's referring to his father. He's referring to his dad coming up to him and saluting him, and him being the first one to salute rather than Louis Gossett Jr. But of course, he doesn't show up. Now, reportedly, Robert Loggia actually protested to the removal of his scene at the graduation, and the footage no longer exists. But honestly, I'm with the director on this one. I'm with the director in that we don't need to see his father again. I mean, Zach Mayo proves at the end of the movie that he's the better man than his father. And it makes perfect sense based on what we saw of his father in the beginning, that he would not appear at the graduation and that he would not be the one to give his son the first salute. It just makes a lot more sense that Robert Loggia's character of Byron Mayo isn't here. Despite the fact he's a career lifer in the Navy and everything, and that he should be ultimately very, very proud of his son for accomplishing this, he's not there. He doesn't show up. I mean, in the movie's universe, he does not show up, and I think that's the way it should be. And here we have this actual scene where they give silver dollars to Louis Gossett Jr. This is a long, long tradition where, and now look at Louis Gossett Jr.'s reaction to each one that comes up and gives him the silver dollar, because he knows that he'll probably never see any of his students again, but he's also very, very proud that they got through the program despite his tough leadership. And here, of course, the music signifies Richard Gere. He gives Louis Gossett Jr. the silver dollar. And Richard Gere has to take this moment to thank Louis Gossett Jr. personally, especially after being humiliated after the martial arts and everything. Yeah, I mean, he means that. Zach Mayo actually means that. And here he becomes, as the title suggests, he becomes a gentleman, an officer and a gentleman. And Della Serrar is going to give him the silver dollar. Now look at Louis Gossett Jr.'s face as and he just looks down and smiles at him. That's wonderful. That is so wonderful. Yeah. But as we soon see, Louis Gossett Jr. is going to get an entire new class, and the cycle is going to start all over again. The only difference in the speech that he gave in the beginning of the movie with this one is that he changes Mick Jagger to punk rock music, and that's what lets you know of the sort of the time that this movie came out in, transitioning from the 1970s to the 1980s. Only two things come out of Arizona: steers and queers. Now, here we have the very, very famous ending. The very famous ending everybody knows about, even if they've never seen the movie. Don Simpson, who shepherded this project in the very beginning, he hated the ending and told Taylor Hackford not to shoot it. The studio told Taylor Hackford not to shoot it. Richard Gere said this ending is total bullshit and that he refuses to shoot it. Okay, here he is coming in his white ice cream outfit, about to pick up Debra Winger, and look, Douglas Day Stewart admitted he wrote it as a fairy tale ending where the white knight comes in and picks up the girl and takes her out of this warehouse of hell and go off and be a Navy wife, an officer's wife. The only reason why Taylor Hackford shot the scene was because he wanted to honor what Douglas Day Stewart wrote, even if it was never going to be used. And it was during the shooting of the scene, Richard Gere was disgruntled, but he did it as a professional. And a lot of the extras started to cry. Like Taylor Hackford said, they saw an image of themselves, and the whole thing about art imitating life and everything. They saw themselves in this finale. All of these are just local extras. They're all just extras in this small town that they shot in. And this was a genuine reaction to how they shot the scene. That is all real extras from the small town who are affected emotionally by this entire moment. And it wasn't until a rough cut that Richard Gere, when he was watching the movie and they got the music just right. They got it at the right tempo. And the hairs on the back of his neck literally stood up. And he knew. And Taylor Hackford knew that the sequence was going to work because of the reaction. But it wasn't until Richard Gere saw it with the music that he was fully convinced that Taylor Hackford was 100% to shoot this ending. And Douglas Day Stewart actually has the greatest quote ever when it comes to when people saw this in the theater. I mean, he said that when the movie came out that there were long lines. I mean, people were going to see this movie in droves. And one person he went to the theater with, he overheard somebody say after they left the theater, "That was the worst ending I've ever seen in my life, and I've seen it 5 times." So, Up Where We Belong, sung by Joe Cocker and Jennifer Warnes. The theme for An Officer and a Gentleman by Buffy St. Marie. Yep. And here we have the soundtrack and everything. At any rate, I am so happy. Thank you so much for everybody coming out and watching An Officer and a Gentleman with me. I mean, like I said, 40 years later, I think this movie remains a timeless masterpiece that was, everything threatened to make this production go down the drain. There were problems left and right, and it's really a miracle that we have this movie. And I'm gonna say it straight out. I wouldn't believe we would have Top Gun if it wasn't for Officer and Gentleman, and thus I believe that we wouldn't have Top Gun Maverick without An Officer and a Gentleman. I haven't seen the movie yet. I've heard nothing but unanimous praise, and I'm taking all that with a grain of salt because of my feelings of the first Top Gun. But here again, I do believe that An Officer and a Gentleman at least paved the road for the Top Gun movies. And I still think that Top Gun owes this movie a lot of debt. But at any rate, that's An Officer and a Gentleman. Thank you, everybody, so much for coming out tonight. Scott, Katrina, Jamie, and Christian, and Rob Gasper. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Dan Shine as well. Tomorrow night at 9 p.m., I will be back here to do a double audio commentary for the Hot Shots movies, starring Charlie Sheen, Valeria Golino, and Lloyd Bridges. Tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern. See you all at that time. And thank